Before we dive into the topic, I would like to take a moment to introduce you to the Clementines initiative, the reason why we are all gathered here today. So, the Clementines project is an initiative aimed at empowering young people to take a meaningful action in the fight against climate change. And the project focuses on engaging young workers and providing them with the tools, knowledge, and strategies to engage young people effectively in climate advocacy and decision-making processes. So, by working closely with young people across Europe, Clementinus tries to create a wave of change, ensuring that young voices are not just heard but also valued in shaping climate policies. So for this reason, today we have a very special guest with us, and I would like to introduce you, Jana, who holds a role of Austrian United Nations Youth Delegate within the Austrian National Youth Council. She represents young people in Austria in United Nations processes and in related topics. So Jana also is the representative work at the international level. An equally important part of her mandate is to make international processes and their results understandable for young people in Austria. So, Jana, welcome. We are very excited to have you here today. I don't know if you want to say anything to our participants here. Feel free.
Hi. Hi. No, I'm really happy to be here.
Perfect. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you so much. It's a great pleasure to have you here. So let me start with our first question for you today. So as I already know, you started your advocacy journey at just 13 years old, which is very impressive. And I would like to ask you what inspired you to take action on children's rights and environmental issues that early?
And thank you. Thank you so much for the question. Actually, I want to start by maybe sharing some slides that I have prepared because there's also a picture of me at 13, which could maybe be interesting. Second. I hope you can see this now. Yeah. So as I said, thank you very much for the introduction and also for having me here today. I'm 25 now, but I started when I was 13 or turning 14 back in 2013. So a long time ago, and back then I was a nerd. I was reading a lot of books, but I was always super interested in what was going on in the world. I was, yeah, I would say a curious person. And then I read one day the like a leaflet for a local youth participation project, which was like, you want to change the world, you want to be active, and yeah, I really felt like, oh, this could be something interesting. So I applied. And at the beginning, we were a group of like 10 young people. And I think this really changed, I would say, my whole life because the project, it gave me the chance to be active. It turned me basically from a listener and like a child that did not have that much, power into someone who could be an active change maker. And I think that was really the key moment for me. I often felt too young for something, but in this project, we had the tools, we got the knowledge to really start changing and start advocating for our own rights. This is also where I got inspired by children's rights because I saw them also as a tool to advocate for my own, but also for other children's rights. So back then there was no Fridays for Future, like a huge youth movement. But at the same time, I saw like these children's rights as something that I could really use to leverage my and other young people's voices. And this is also where I first really learned how local action can spark international processes, can really also relate to what is going on in the world worldwide. So yeah, that was my start.
Thank you, Jana. It is very inspiring indeed. So my next question to you would be if you can please briefly explain to us what the triple planetary crisis is and how it relates to children's rights.
Yeah, sure. Well, I think a lot of you are working in the climate-related sector, so probably you all know that. But for me as an advocate, it's always really important to not only talk about climate change, but actually the triple planetary crisis, which consists of climate change, but also biodiversity loss and environmental pollution. This was a really important thing because all of these issues and crises are linked together and they also influence each other. As we all know, I mean, climate crisis is one of the most or the most pressing issue of humanity today. And it really affects all of our lives, but especially young people and children. And I think this comes on later in a question of how young people and children are particularly affected. But I think all of these three crises show that young people and children are at the heart of all of this. And it's for me, it's a really important point to link those crises to children's rights. And maybe I also wanted to just quickly brief you on what the children's rights are, because I'm not sure everyone knows them. These are universally applicable rights that aim to protect and promote all children and young people under 18 worldwide. And it was agreed upon by the United Nations member states in 1989, so already some time ago. And something that always surprises people is that it's the most widely approved agreement worldwide. It currently there is only one member state that has not ratified it, which is the United States of America. So yeah, this is just briefly for the children's rights. And I'm making this link because it's really important. As I said, the climate change affects young people, but they have their rights and they should be protected. So there's something and a document that links those two, which is called the General Comment Number 26. This sounds super baroque, but it's really practical actually, because it's a document that explains to governments how children's rights are related to the environment and climate change and what they must do to protect them. So it's a really useful tool for actually young people and advocates to advocate for their rights. And there was something really special about this general comment, because general comments have been released a few times, actually 26 times already from the Child Rights Committee. But in this process, there was a lot of child participation. As you can see, there were over 16,000 children from 121 countries that expressed their views, that shared their ideas in consultations with members of this advisory council. So that was really special. And you could also really feel that this whole process did something with the UN system, at least in the child rights bubble, I would say. And to say, the General Comment 26 basically says that children and young people have a right to a clean and healthy and a sustainable environment. And this was really pivotal because in the Child Rights Convention, there is no right in general. There are a lot of articles, more than 50, but there is no article to a right to a clean and healthy environment. But this was also, they agreed upon it over 30 years ago. So they were like, actually, there is something. It is not an own article, but all of the articles that are listed there, so the right to education, the right to health, the right to growing up in safety, for example, all of these link together, and all of these together form the right to a healthy, sustainable, and clean environment. So this is a really important thing, I think, that can be used more even in advocacy work.
Perfect. Thank you. Hannah, from what you already mentioned, it is very important to me to highlight that climate change, let's say, disproportionately affects and impacts children and young people around the world. As, of course, we can all understand that they are more vulnerable. Could you please explain why is that happening?
Yeah, sure. Well, I think one of the most important things is that children, young people are intersectionally affected. So they are not only affected by one aspect, but by all aspects, and they all link together. And most of the time, it's worsen the situation. So, for example, they face higher biophysical risk because of their age, or if they're still growing up, or they also have less power and advocacy in terms of they contributed less to the state of the crisis, but also have limited political influence, at least mostly also speaking for children. And they also have a lot of long-term risks that are still unknown, but also that are already there. And there's also a lot of data out there, which I would say is one positive thing. It's something that is researched a lot, how children and youth are affected. But for example, 1 billion children live in countries that are at an extremely high risk of the impacts of climate change. So this is a really huge number. That shows how children and young people are affected. Also, a lot of children and young people have disruptions in their education because of extreme weather events, for example. I think I also yesterday I read a study from UNICEF that said that, for example, in Greece, 70% of children had to disrupt their education in the last year because of extreme weather events. So there is something that affects other children's rights that they have. And something I think that is still where we still have to discuss a lot is climate anxiety and dissatisfaction with the government responses, because this really affects the mental health for children and young people. And I think this is something where we still have a long way to go. Yeah. So I think this shows really well how children and youth are particularly affected by climate change.
The numbers that you are sharing with us are shocking and unfortunately depict the situation that we are facing now. And climate anxiety is, of course, something that is affecting young people and children, and we should all also take into our consideration for this young generation. So, Jana, my next question will be, what role do children and young people play in advocating for environmental and climate justice by taking all this into consideration?
Well, for me, I think they play the most important role. Everything else would be a wrong answer. I think their essential role is that they have perspectives of their own lived experiences, and they have their own realities that if they're not incorporated in policies, in laws, they're just missing. And I think these are essential perspectives that we cannot leave out. I think also they have a lot of, or like we, as youth and children, have a lot of power of mobilizing. You can see it with Fridays for Future, but you, for example, also now in Serbia, you can see a lot what happens if young people mobilize, if they form communities, and if they advocate for their rights. So I think there's a lot of power there. Also, one thing that is really important is the power of social media and of forming global connections. I think young people and also children are really, I think they're the front runners in how to connect and how to mobilize globally, how to share things on social media, how to engage people that maybe would not have been involved if they would have not seen stories or something online. So I think this is something that we use a lot, and that's also a power of the young generation. I also think grassroots mobilizations is something that is natural to a lot of young people, and that is something that is essential to even international processes. I think all of this would not be worth anything if the grassroots mechanisms weren't there. So I think young people are engaged a lot on local levels, and I think that is really, really important. And well, there's a long list. Maybe another thing that I think is super important is the term of future generations in this whole topic. So children and youth are not future generations, they're here already, but I think they're the ones that are the most connected to future generations, not only in terms of because they're the youngest, but I think also because of we have this foresight. I think we have this capacity of thinking beyond our own generation, and I think this is a really important point that we can leverage even more. And also going on with this, like in line with this, I think this also the intergenerational aspect in general. I think this is something that is essential in the climate advocacy, and I think this is something that young people really champion as well. So yeah, a lot of things.
I totally agree with you, and I would like to highlight here a very important obstacle that young people face is when trying to engage or interact with decision makers so that their voices are actually heard in local and international level. So this brings my next question to you, and please share with us your view on, in your experience, what are the most effective ways that young people can engage with decision makers in both local and international level?
Well, I think when you posted the question, I was really like, I thought about it a lot because it was like, what is like the most effective way? And I don't really think there is one way. I just think that all of child and youth participation has to be done on a certain minimum standards. There is a really great policy brief on meaningful youth engagement. Maybe some of you know it, where there are 12 points on how child and youth participation should work. And I think all of the governments and all of the people doing projects should read this, because I think this is essential. And I think this is also something that there's not one way to do child participation or youth participation, but there are certain things that you have to consider, and like core things that you have to do. For example, child participation always has to be right, spaced, and safe. It also always has to be designated, transparent, also resourced, but also accessible, because I think a lot of processes, you said, are not really accessible to children or to young people. It also has to be diverse and inclusive, but also the question of accountability, I think, is also something that is really important. I just listed some of them here on the slide, but I think these are essential, because if these are not fulfilled, children and young people, they can participate, they can engage, but at the end, a lot of times they're frustrated with the projects or with the governments that they're part of. So I think this is really like the first thing if you want to engage young people and children. And I also think, as said before, there's not one way. I think there's also a lot of potential for creative ways for bringing on in your own talents. Also, young people and children have like unique languages, not only in terms of that they have, all their own first languages, but also new ways to communicate, also to reach out to other communities, to mobilize, bring other young people in. And I think that's something that is really effective in terms of, if young people advocate. And one thing that I learned, or that was, I think, that really was the key in my own advocacy work, is always work in a team. I think it's always easier together, the wins and also the things that don't go that well. So this is really something that is key. And I'm not sure if it fits to the question, but I also brought like the example of actually what we do as youth delegates and how we work on the different levels. Maybe this could also be interesting.
Yes, of course. Of course.
Okay, then I brought some pictures too. Because I think, if you hear youth delegate, it always sounds like, okay, I go to the UN, go to the conferences, and there speak for all young people in Austria. First of all, I think this is impossible because, yeah, there are 3 million young people in Austria and I could never represent all of them. But what we do is more than just going to young conferences. What we do is also a lot working with the National Youth Council, but also youth organizations. We do workshops, we go to conferences, we talk to young people directly, and basically bring all the UN processes that are happening to them and be like, hey, so what would be your input on, for example, women's rights and what has been just discussed last month in New York? So we always try to link it to their lived realities and then bring all the input that they give to us back to the UN and back to UN language too. So there's a lot of translation work happening, but I think that is really important that we never forget that there are a lot of levels that are involved in this international work. It is a lot of work that we do, with international partners and actors. But I think the essential thing is happening on local, regional, or national levels, and I think this is really important to keep in mind in terms of advocacy and how to bring this all together to even be stronger for young people. Yeah, so I just wanted to highlight this. I think there's a lot of great ways to advocate for it. This is just something that, I think brings a lot of great perspectives on a really high level of decision making.
Thank you, Jana, for sharing your experience. It's very interesting to see your work, and thank you for sharing the pictures with us and with our participants today. And so, just the last question for you: what steps could youth workers, educators, and organizations take to empower young people to advocate for their rights? In such ways as you showed us right now?
I think one thing is really simple, but looking back, that always had me is when someone believed in me. I think believe in them it's so basic, but it really shows that you trust in their capacities, in their also like their talents, in their knowledge, and it gives them confidence. So I think if you have someone that says, "Hey, I think you can do this," I think this is something that is worth a lot more than funding or anything. Of course, funding is super important. I think also one thing is giving them responsibilities and also the tools. So to support them in their ideas, but to take a step back and like be the person, the supporter in the background, but letting them take the lead is something that is goes hand in hand with believing in them. But I think this is a really one key thing. And another key thing, and maybe this also comes from my child rights background, is teach them about their rights, because they have a right to participation. It is written in most of the states' constitutions. So I think this is something really important, the knowledge that they have this right. And I know there's a lot of situations where it's not that easy to exercise them. It's not that easy to access them. But the knowledge that these rights are enshrined actually, and their countries have ratified them, this is, I think it can be a key. Of course, there's different levels of, the possibilities to exercise them. But I think this is a really important point that maybe I can share or highlight.
I couldn't agree more with you. And it's something that we have also noticed here, that knowing your rights, it's not something very common. So many young people do not participate and do not advocate for this exact reason. So, Jana, thank you so much. We truly appreciate your contribution and your presence here with us. I don't know if you want to say anything else before we close our webinar for today.
Just feel free to stay in contact or to contact me if you also want to know anything about like local projects or also the Youth Delegate programs, because they exist in not only in Austria but in many at least European countries. So if you have any questions, you want to contact of your own local Youth Delegates, please reach out to me via email or follow us on our Instagram, where we actually try to show the transparency of these young processes and be like, hey, this is something that is also there for you. So yeah, please feel free. And thank you so much, for having me today. Yeah.
It was a pleasure, and thank you for the information that you shared with us. Everything was very interesting. So I would like to thank all of you for your participation today, and a special thanks to Jana again for her presence here and for this insightful and engaging discussion. So we look forward to seeing you all next week for our next and final webinar, Climate Action and Policy Influence, Youth as Decision Makers. Thank you all again, and see you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.